what to do while lucid. This is the fun part, because there's 6 categories that I really like to talk about in this case normally. Number 1 is fun, which is obvious. Lucid dreaming is incredibly fun. It can be kind of the most fun thing you can think of, because whatever you can think of, you can do. Imagine you can have any superpower you want. You can fly. You can create worlds. You can do anything that occurs to you, and as long as it can occur to you, then you can do it. It really is that simple. It's just, it requires the ability for it to occur to you, which is actually kind of a weird subtlety. Some things that are really fun and engaging are not actually as clear to us as we think they might be. So take drawing a hand, for example. I mean, if you were to draw a hand, you can imagine a hand, right? You can imagine it's got 5 fingers, it's got all the lines and the creases and whatnot, the joints, knuckles. It's not that hard to imagine. But if you ever try to draw one, you might be surprised at how little information of your visual memory of a hand translates to the page. And I don't think that's because we just have bad brain to hand transference. I think it's actually because our idea of a hand is much more low resolution than we realize. It's actually very simple in our mind, I would imagine. Like a picture on a computer desktop that is an icon of another picture that has much more resolution. That picture isn't actually that detailed, and if you could zoom in on it, it would look very little like the actual picture. I think that's what our imagination of a hand is. And so flying, for example, in dreams, while seemingly simple to imagine right now in your waking state for the quarter of a second that you imagine just taking off, it's actually very difficult sometimes, because you have to squat down and jump, and then you have to feel the air going across you, and you have to see, 3-dimensional space moving away, and you have to hear sounds differently, and it's actually quite a process to visualize flying sufficiently so that it's convincing to your dreaming mind. And so you might find it's actually a little bit trickier to do these kinds of things. But then, like anything else, they get easier with time, and they might actually be very easy. Sometimes you can just snap into it. It's very good. So have fun. That's the first category. Second category is fantasy. This one also is probably the second most common thing people do, and you can let your imagination run wild. Sexual fantasies or role-playing fantasies of, like, you want to be some kind of, if you want to be an astronaut, or if you want to be, this rock climber who has 6 arms, or whatever it is that you want to imagine just to go nuts with. You want to do your favorite childhood fantasies of whatever heroic adventure you want to go on. Those are fantastic ways of using lucid dreaming as well. Although, one caveat there, you will likely be swept up in the drama if it's very emotive content. So the more emotive the content is, in my experience and what I've read, the harder it is to stay lucid once you're there. So you can counteract that. You just have to be really clicked into your senses, and you have to remember vividly, this is a dream. That's what's happening right now, is it's a dream. And once you can do that, once you can really lock in, you can kind of do whatever you want in terms of the fantasy realm. But it definitely will get strange quickly, and you might get swept up in the drama. So be on the lookout for that. Strike that balance. After that, nightmares. This one's really important because a lot of people get into lucid dreaming because they're having nightmares. It's a fantastic way to resolve those. Once you become aware that you're dreaming, then there's no sense in having the nightmare anymore. You're not going to deliberately torture yourself. At least I wouldn't do that. Maybe you would, but hopefully not. If you're having a nightmare, most people, the first thing they do with their nightmare, let's say they're being chased by like a giant lion bear that is breathing fire on them. Something just insanely comical. What most people will do is they'll turn around and they'll like shoot a bazooka at it or something. Like just do something crazy, or they like punch it out of the sky, like something usually aggressive and retaliatory. And do that if you want, by all means. It's actually can be kind of encouraging to your confidence to fight back against a monster and beat it. But after a while, if you're having nightmares continuously, what I would recommend is actually taking a different approach. Instead of attacking the monster, what you can do is engage it and actually just yell at it and say something, or just talk to it and say something like, why are you here? Like, how can I help you? And it might sound a little odd, but very often these monsters will stop and they'll look at you and then they'll communicate, and they might transform before your eyes into something benevolent or funny. It's really common for people to have that dream experience with nightmares, and I've done that a lot, and those are the best dreams. Some of the best dreams I've ever had have been nightmares that turned into beautiful dreams because I confronted whatever scary thing was happening in a way that was less retaliatory and more loving and open and inquiring, and I've been rewarded for that, and I expect you would be as well. After nightmares, we have problem solving. A famous example, Thomas Edison used to have this reclining chair, and he would have ball bearings in his hands, and he'd be, laying down, and as he would fall asleep, he would drop the balls, and they would clang into pans on the ground. And then when that would happen, he would snap awake, and then he'd write down whatever was in his mind at that point. And he would do this process repeatedly, spurring all kinds of imagination and all kinds of creative dots connecting in his mind. That was just brilliant to his creative process. Very useful. And so that's not quite lucid dreaming, but it's close. It's called liminal dreaming. Look that up if you're interested. It's similar in some ways. But that's the kind of thing you can do with lucid dreaming, is you prompt the mind to connect new creative solutions to things that you are having trouble thinking of consciously in your waking life. Another man named August Kekulé, pardon my pronunciation, German guy, I think. He came up with the structure for the benzene ring, which is a compound in organic chemistry that's useful for all sorts of industrial materials and whatnot. He came up with that because he had a dream of a snake like eating its own tail. And so he was able to translate that symbolism into the actual structure of what the benzene ring is, which is this fascinating double bind ring of carbon atoms. And I'm probably doing a poor job of explaining that properly, but look that up. It's also very interesting. So those are problem-solving things you can do. You can also use them for interpersonal problem solving. I had this dream in high school where me and my girlfriend at the time were having, difficulties dealing with each other, and as happens in high school. And I had this dream where we were running in this Italian market, and she turns to me and she says something like, "You know why we're having this problem, right?" And I was like, "No, I have no idea. Tell me why." And then she said, I have no idea what she said at this point, because I forgot it because I didn't write it down. But the next day I remembered it sufficiently to take it into our conversation the next day and resolved whatever problems we were having at that time. And it worked out for a little while. But had I written them down, I'd be able to tell you, and I'd be able to remember that. But yeah, you can totally use your lucid dreams for resolving interpersonal conflicts with you and people close to you in your life. At least helping you make sense of them in your own mind. Sometimes the answer is much closer than we think it is, and it can be really gratifying to have that experience. So rehearsal is another thing you can do with lucid dreaming. Rehearsal is kind of like visualization, which a lot of sports experts, athletes will do. A lot of people who perform or present in front of large groups, they'll use rehearsal, and they will use a state of mind to practice what it's like to succeed in these realms and master the subtleties of their art form. You can do that in your lucid dreams, except you can do it with all five senses, which is a hell of a lot more powerful, I would say. So definitely check that out if you get the chance in your lucid dreams. That's a really good use of them as well. If you're going to do that, dream incubation is a really good skill, both for the problem solving and for the rehearsal. Dream incubation is more or less priming the mind for that. So if you want to, you're going to go into your pre-sleep routine. You're going to very clearly map out what you're doing in your mind, what you want to be the case. So let's say you have your problem you're working on, you have your quandary, and you can write about it, you can draw about it, you can just get the unconscious mind to start churning a little bit by feeding into it, and then go to sleep right after that. And you can do this in between sleep cycles, like you're doing the wake back to sleep method, and very likely your dreams will feed into that content. You don't even have to be lucid to benefit from that. You could just have a dream, and then the dream can answer it when you wake up. But if you're lucid, you can actually just, ask the dream pretty straightforward, what's going on here, and how can I address this issue? And it might tell you something really, really useful. The last thing you can do with lucid dreaming is two sides of the same coin. I consider it. It is spiritual transformation and self-therapy. Now, I'm maybe call me a reductionist, but I really do see those two as the same thing. If you address your personal relationship with you and the world around you and your loved ones and your past and your ideal future, that's your self-therapy, and that's going to create more spiritual potency. And if you have more spiritual transformative experiences where you're connecting with the essence of who you are and what it truly means to feel love and to feel acceptance and to be part of this wild universe of ours, then that will translate into your psychological health. I really do see those as kind of just different ways of explaining the same phenomenon, but that's my take on it. So the best way to do that, in my findings and in what I've read, is to go into the dream and engage characters in the dream, asking them questions. It can really be that simple. Just go up to a character in the dream and ask them whatever you want to know. Ask them about your life, your future, your past. Ask them about things you need to be more aware of. You can actually just ask the dream out loud. Just yell, "Show me what I need to see right now," and that can be pretty illuminating too. The dream will just transform before your eyes and give you an output, and sometimes it's not what you would expect. I had this one dream one time where I'll tell a dream story. I was on a hill and I was playing a didgeridoo, as I was doing a lot at that time, and there were elephants. There's a bunch of white elephants in the canyon, and they all lifted their trunks up and started playing into the air. So I was like, oh, I'll do the same thing, and I started playing with them in the air. And a car, kind of like from Harry Potter, a flying car, appeared in the distance and then came all the way around and then parked right in front of me. And it kind of looked like my old, beat up Honda Accord that I had in high school, except it had a red door. And inside it, there's a man in his 30s, and he's completely clean, bald head. Kind of looked like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of Jason Statham or whoever, but little softer facial features. And he gets out of the car, and I forget the first thing he said, but we started talking about all kinds of things. I started asking him questions, and I remember asking him, he was giving me all sorts of interesting answers about deeper questions I had, and I asked him about psychedelics because I was kind of having a crisis with those at the time, wondering if I should just scrap them in my life, because I was starting to have some issues with them about their lack of health on my mental well-being, as people can relate to, I'm sure. And he told me something like, yeah, you probably don't need to do those anymore. They're really just a distraction at this point. And that kind of dropped a bomb in my mind. I didn't expect that kind of answer from him. And that alone kind of to this day has had ripple effects of how I look at them is not so much bad for me or good for me or bad or good for anybody, but really just a tool that is useful in certain circumstances and is not useful in other circumstances. And so since then I have readdressed their relationship to my life in a lot of ways. And then the ending of the dream was he told me he would check back in with me in 20,000 years to see how I was doing. And I was very confused, and I said, there's no way I'm going to live that long. What are you talking about? And he said, oh no, you're going to live for 100 million years. You'll see. Don't worry. So this is just, we'll have our next check-in then. So we'll see how that part goes.